The palace of Queen Illyria was the largest in the Zaralian Empire, a place where light shimmered across silver walls and ceilings that stretched high enough to touch the clouds. Marble floors reflected the glow of twin suns outside, and golden banners hung from every balcony. It was a place built for power, for authority, and for the weight of 1,000 generations of rulers. Yet, today, it felt empty. There was a quiet in the halls that had nothing to do with the usual calm of a royal morning. It was a silence born of loss, a quiet that pressed on every corner of the palace like a shadow. Queen Illyria sat on her throne, the golden arms cold beneath her fingers. Her long, slender hands rested on her knees, but they did not fidget or tremble. She was a queen, a leader, and she had endured many battles, both on the field and in the court. Yet no armor, no diplomacy, no clever plan could fill the hollow space left by her daughter, Princess Leora, who had disappeared 10 years ago. Every day for a decade had been filled with searches, messages, missions, and rumors. Every day had ended with disappointment. But even in the deepest shadows of grief, the queen clung to a small spark of hope. The court moved around her like a silent tide. Attendants cleaned the halls with precise motions. Guards stood in perfect formation, and advisors whispered quietly among themselves. They all knew the story by heart, the missing princess, the endless search, the rumors that she might have been lost forever. Some of the older soldiers remembered when she had been just a child, chasing after birds in the palace gardens, her laughter filling the air. That laughter had been gone for 10 years, and no sound could replace it. Queen Illyria's eyes remained on the far doors of the throne room. She imagined what it would be like to see her daughter return. Would Leora walk through those doors with a smile? Would her voice sound the same, or would it carry the weight of years spent in unknown worlds? She could almost feel her daughter's presence, as if the air itself carried a whisper of her essence, teasing her heart with what might come. The queen's mind drifted back to the night Leora disappeared. She had been exploring the palace gardens, chasing after a strange glowing creature that no one else could see. Queen Illyria had been asleep in her chambers, dreaming of the future of her empire. When she heard the alarm, when the palace erupted in chaos, she had raced through the halls, only to find the gardens empty. The creature had vanished, and so had her daughter. Since then, the palace had been filled with missions, travelers from distant worlds, and spies sent to find the missing princess. None had succeeded. Outside, the twin suns began to rise fully, casting long golden shadows across the marble floors. Light reflected in the queen's silver eyes as she finally rose from her throne. Her robes, woven from the threads of rare Zaralian silks, rustled softly, the sound like distant whispers. She walked slowly to the balcony, peering over the vast city below. Ships from distant planets glinted like tiny stars as they moved across the sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of the palace, her daughter might still be alive. Somewhere, Leora might be waiting for the right moment to return. Hope, fragile but persistent, flickered in her chest. The queen had learned patience over centuries, and she had learned that even in the darkest times, a single spark could ignite a fire. Today, she would wait. Today, she would watch. And perhaps, just perhaps, today the silence of the palace would be broken. The sun had just begun to rise fully, bathing the palace in soft gold and silver light. When the massive doors of the throne room opened, a hush fell over the gathered attendants, advisors, and guards. No one had expected visitors at this hour, and certainly not the ones who now stepped into the light. A young woman appeared first. Her hair shimmered like liquid silver, catching the sunlight with every subtle movement. Her eyes, bright and calm, seemed to carry the depth of the night sky itself, flecked with tiny stars. Every step she took was steady, confident, yet gentle, as though the marble floors themselves recognized her presence. The court froze. Some whispered her name in disbelief, while others could barely breathe. It was Princess Leora, After 10 long years, she had returned. But what made the hall fall completely silent was not her alone. On either side of her, small hands clutched hers tightly. 2 children, unfamiliar to the court, stood beside her. Their features were strange yet strangely familiar, softer than Zaralian, warmer, human. Half human, by the look of them. One child had her mother's bright eyes but carried the curve of a human smile. The other had hair darker than Leora's, but the same calm determination in his gaze. The soldiers shifted nervously. Diplomats whispered among themselves. How could this be? Humans were fragile, unpredictable, outsiders. And yet here they were, holding the hands of the missing princess as if they had always belonged. Queen Illyria's heart raced. She rose from her throne, her robes swishing softly over the polished floor. She could barely speak. "Leora!" Her voice trembled, and the word sounded foreign to her own ears after so many years of silence. She took hesitant steps forward, feeling every heartbeat echoing through her chest. Leora's gaze met her mother's, steady and unwavering. "Mother," she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that melted the chill of the palace. "I have returned, and I have brought hope with me." The queen's eyes fell to the children, and for a moment, all she saw was the innocence of youth, untouched by the politics and conflicts of the empire. The little boy and girl looked up at her with trust, a silent plea for acceptance. Queen Illyria felt a strange tug at her chest, pride, fear, and wonder all at once. Could she embrace these children, whose very existence challenged tradition, whose presence threatened to shake the rigid walls of her court? Yet, how could she not? The hall seemed to hold its breath as Leora knelt before her mother, guiding the children to the plush royal carpet. "These are my children," she said clearly, her tone calm yet firm. "They carry both our blood and the spirit of another world. They are strong, Mother. They are brave. And they are ours." The court erupted into murmurs, some questioning, some awe-filled. The idea of humans so closely tied to Zaralian royalty was difficult to comprehend. Some ministers whispered doubts about tradition, lineage, and purity of the royal bloodline. But the queen, standing tall and regal, felt none of that fear. She looked at the children and saw what her daughter saw: potential, courage, and a bridge between worlds. The children, small yet unyielding, took a cautious step forward, offering their hands to Queen Illyria. It was an unspoken promise, a silent connection across generations, species, and galaxies. The queen's heart swelled, and tears prickled at the edges of her silver eyes. "Come closer," she whispered, finally allowing herself to bend her pride. The children obeyed, and for the first time in 10 long years, the throne room was filled with a warmth it had never known. The light from the twin suns outside seemed to intensify, casting a golden glow over the reunion, as if the universe itself celebrated the return of the princess and the promise of a new future. And in that moment, Queen Illyria realized something profound. The universe had given her daughter back, and with her came something even more powerful than bloodlines or crowns. They had brought life, hope, and a lesson that would ripple across generations. Sometimes, the strongest warriors were not the ones forged in battle alone, but those born of courage, love, and unity. The throne room buzzed with whispers, hushed questions, and startled gasps. Ministers leaned closer to each other, trying to hide their astonishment. Guards shifted uneasily, unsure whether to salute or step back. In all their years of service, no one had ever seen a princess return holding the hands of human children. It was unprecedented, impossible, yet undeniably real. Queen Illyria's silver eyes swept across the room, sharp and commanding despite the emotions swirling inside her. She had expected questions, doubt, and perhaps even fear, but she had not expected the magnitude of this moment. For 10 years, the palace had been filled with empty echoes, with the ache of a daughter lost to the stars. And now Liara stood before her, not alone, but with two living reminders that hope could survive even the darkest void. The ministers murmured among themselves. "Half-human?" One whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. "The princess? With human children? How is this possible?" Another shook his head, muttering about tradition and the purity of Zeralian bloodlines. Some exchanged wary glances, clearly uncertain how to proceed. Liara knelt before her mother, keeping her voice calm but firm. "These are my children," she said, gently guiding them to the soft carpet. The little girl's bright eyes flicked nervously toward the adults, and the boy mirrored her movements, curiosity and caution mingling in his gaze. "They are the future of both our worlds. They carry courage, wisdom, and a bond that cannot be broken by fear or doubt." The queen's heart clenched. She had spent a decade imagining this moment, and it was far more overwhelming than she had ever imagined. The children were small, yes, but she could see something extraordinary in their posture, in the way they held themselves. They were not fragile. They were not weak. And in their innocence, they carried a quiet, unyielding strength. A counselor finally stepped forward, his expression cold. "Your Majesty," he said, "these children are not fully Zyralian. Their presence may unsettle the court and confuse our alliances. We must consider tradition and the legacy of the throne." Queen Illyria's eyes narrowed, her voice calm but powerful, carrying the weight of centuries of leadership. "Tradition is important," she said, "but it is not more important than life, courage, and love. These children are not a threat, they are a bridge. A bridge between worlds that will make us stronger, not weaker." Some of the ministers stiffened, others blinked in shock. The guards stood taller, sensing the queen's resolve. Even the most rigid court members could feel the authority in her tone. Liara reached out, her hands brushing the children's hair and shoulders, a protective gesture that conveyed more than words ever could. One young advisor, barely more than a boy himself, whispered to his neighbor, They look so human, but there's something different. Something in their eyes. They are not ordinary." Queen Illyria caught the whisper and allowed herself a small, private smile. Yes, they were different. They were special. And in that difference lay the strength that could reshape their empire. She looked at her daughter, pride swelling like a tide she had long restrained. Liara had survived years of unknown dangers, returned not broken but stronger, and had brought life hope back to the throne. The children, sensing the tension, but feeling the quiet approval of the queen, held each other's hands. They stood a little taller, as if knowing they were not only accepted but vital. Liara's gaze swept the room, steady and commanding. "Fear is natural," she said softly, "but courage is stronger. These children represent a future where fear does not rule. They will learn, grow, and protect this empire alongside all of us together." The court fell silent. No one dared interrupt. The message had been clear, the bond undeniable. For the first time in 10 years, the palace was filled not only with whispers, but with something deeper, awe. The kind of awe that precedes hope, the kind that makes hearts open to possibilities they had never imagined. Queen Illyria finally exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. She stepped forward, extending her hands toward the children. "Come closer," she said. And when they obeyed, taking cautious steps toward her, the queen realized something profound. Liara had not only returned. She had returned with a promise, one that would echo across generations. The empire might have questioned it. The court might have doubted it. But the bond between mother, daughter, and these two extraordinary children was stronger than any law, tradition, or fear. And in that bond, Queen Illyria knew, lay the first spark of a brighter future. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows through the tall windows of the palace. Inside, the throne room had quieted, leaving space for something deeper than whispers or council murmurs. Queen Illyria sat in her throne again, though her posture was softer now, her eyes fixed on her daughter and the two children at her feet. She felt a mixture of relief, awe, and a twinge of lingering pain, a pain born from 10 years of imagining what had become of Leora, wondering if she had survived at all. Leora knelt before her mother, the children close by her sides, their small hands resting lightly on her knees. Her voice was calm, steady, and full of warmth as she began to speak. "Mother, I have been to worlds you would not believe," she said softly. "I have walked among humans, learned from them, and faced dangers I could not have imagined. Every day was a test, every moment a challenge, but I survived. And I learned things that I could not have learned here." Queen Illyria listened intently. Every word carried weight. She had expected stories of peril, of capture, of exile, but Leora's words painted a picture not only of struggle, but of growth. The princess had faced hardships that the queen could never have shielded her from, yet she had returned stronger, wiser, and more certain of who she was. The children looked up at the queen with eyes wide and trusting. The little girl reached out to touch the queen's hand, her fingers brushing the cold silver of Illyria's glove. The boy mirrored her gesture, his small hand pressing against the queen's palm with tentative confidence. Queen Illyria felt an unexpected warmth bloom in her chest. These children, fragile in appearance but fierce in spirit, were living proof of resilience. They were her grandchildren, yes, but more than that. They were the living embodiment of hope and survival. Leora's voice grew firmer, more passionate, as she recounted her years among humans. She told of their courage in the face of scarcity, their cleverness when faced with danger, and their kindness even to strangers. She told of times when she had nearly given up, and times when a human stranger's hand had pulled her forward. Each story was a lesson in resilience, in hope, in the power of compassion, the kind of power that no royal decree, no army, and no palace walls could ever provide. The queen felt tears prick at the edges of her eyes. 10 years ago, she had feared she would never see her daughter again. 10 years ago, the palace had echoed with silence and sorrow. And now, here was Leora, returned not only alive but transformed, holding the next generation in her hands. The pain of loss and the ache of longing were still there, but they were mixed with something far stronger: pride, love, and the stirring of hope. The children, sensing the intensity of the moment, drew closer to their mother. They had not been shielded from the challenges of life, yet their trust and calmness were remarkable. They looked at the queen as if asking for permission, seeking her blessing silently. Queen Illyria reached out, her long fingers brushing the heads of the two children. A smile, tentative at first, spread across her face. "You have changed," she whispered to Leora. "You are no longer the little girl who ran through the palace gardens. You have grown into someone strong, wise, and brave." "And I have learned from the humans," Leora replied. "They taught me that strength is not always measured by power or skill, Mother. Sometimes it is measured by the courage to face fear, the kindness to care for others, and the will to continue when everything seems lost." Queen Illyria felt her chest swell with pride. She realized that the children were not just part of Leora, they were part of everything she had learned, everything she had become, and everything the Empire could hope to be. Their presence, their bond with Leora, was a promise of something greater, a future where courage and compassion could shape the destiny of their worlds. The sun now cast its final light across the palace floor, painting golden patterns around the family. In that moment, the queen understood that while the years of pain had been long, they had not been in vain. Leora had returned, carrying with her the lessons of survival, love, and hope. And the Empire, once filled with silence and fear, could now look forward to a future bright with possibility. The next morning, the throne room was alive with tension. Ministers, counselors, and advisors gathered in their usual positions, but their faces were clouded with doubt. The news of Princess Leora's return and the presence of her human children had spread quickly through the palace. Whispers filled the hall, each one questioning the propriety, the tradition, and the very future of the Zaralian Empire. Some counselors exchanged worried glances. "This is unheard of," one murmured. "The princess, with human children? How can this be tolerated? How can this empire remain strong if our bloodlines are diluted?" Another shook his head. "The children may be innocent now, but the influence of humans is unpredictable. They may bring weakness, confusion, or worse." Queen Illyria sat on her throne, watching her daughter and the children as they moved quietly among the courtiers. Her silver eyes were sharp yet calm. She could feel the tension in the air, the fear of change that had long been part of Zaralian culture. But she also felt something else: pride, love, and an unshakable certainty that these children belonged here, just as much as anyone else in the empire. Leora, kneeling beside her children, spoke softly but with strength. "These are my children," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "They are not a threat to our people or our traditions. They carry our blood, yes, but they also carry lessons from a world that has survived through courage, kindness, and unity. You may see them as different, but they are strong, and their hearts are brave." Some of the counselors stiffened, unable to hide their discomfort. One older minister stepped forward, his voice firm. "Princess Leora, with respect, these children are not fully Zaralian. They may lack the resilience of our people. How can you expect us to accept them as part of the royal family?" Leora rose, standing tall. Her posture was commanding, her expression calm but unwavering. "Resilience is not measured by blood alone," she said. "It is measured by courage, by the willingness to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and by the strength to face fear when the world is against you. These children have survived hardships that you cannot imagine, and they have learned to persevere. They are proof that strength comes in many forms." The queen's eyes softened as she looked at her daughter. Leora had returned not only alive but transformed, carrying a wisdom that only experience and struggle could give. She had grown beyond the sheltered life of the palace, and now she was teaching the court something invaluable: that courage and heart could be more powerful than tradition alone. The children, sensing the unease in the room, held each other's hands tightly. The little girl's eyes met the queen's, shining with innocence and trust. The boy looked at Leora, his small face serious but confident, as if understanding that this moment required courage beyond his years. They were learning, growing, and already showing the qualities that made them extraordinary. A young advisor whispered to his neighbor, clearly impressed despite himself. They carry a presence. It is not just blood or lineage they are. Different. Stronger somehow." Queen Illyria's heart swelled. She knew that the court's doubt would take time to fade, but she also knew that she and her daughter had faced challenges greater than whispers and fear. "They are not outsiders," the queen said, her voice clear and commanding. "They are the future of our empire, a bridge to worlds we cannot ignore. And in that bridge lies the strength to survive and thrive where others might fail." The council fell silent. Even the most skeptical court members could feel the truth in her words. The children, small yet radiant with courage, had already begun to shift the hearts of those around them. The palace, once bound by tradition and fear, was beginning to see the possibility of something new, a future built on unity, courage, and the unbreakable bond of family. Leora knelt again beside the children, brushing their hair gently from their faces. Her smile was quiet, full of warmth and reassurance. "Do not fear their doubts," she whispered. "We will show them the strength that comes from love, from courage, and from standing together." The queen nodded, feeling a wave of pride and hope. This was only the beginning, but for the first time in many years, she believed that the empire's future could be brighter than anything she had imagined. The days passed, and the palace began to adjust to the unexpected presence of Leora and her children. Some counselors remained skeptical, their whispers never far from the throne room walls. But others could not deny what they were witnessing. The children, though small, were astonishingly capable. Their minds were sharp, their instincts quick, and their hearts braver than many seasoned Zaralian soldiers. Each morning, the royal tutors began to teach them in earnest. Languages, history, strategy, and etiquette filled their days, and the children absorbed every lesson with a surprising ease. Their human curiosity pushed them further than expected. They asked questions the tutors could not answer and offered ideas that sparked discussions across the court. Even the most rigid advisors began to notice the spark of brilliance in their young eyes. One afternoon, a drill was held in the palace courtyard. Guards and young nobles lined the arena to demonstrate skill and discipline. Leora's children stood at her side, hesitant at first. But when they were called to participate, they moved with grace and determination. They had learned to adapt quickly, observing the movements of others and applying their own instincts and ways the humans had developed over generations of survival. The crowd watched in stunned silence. A senior general, who had long doubted the princess's judgment, muttered to another, They are stronger than I expected. Not in muscle, but in spirit and strategy. They read the world differently. And yet they are unafraid. The queen observed quietly from the balcony, her silver eyes filled with pride. These children were more than a link between two worlds. They were proof of something greater. That courage, intelligence, and love could thrive even in unexpected forms. She knew that the skeptics in the court would need more than words to accept them. But actions like these could not be ignored. Later that evening, a human diplomat visiting the empire raised a question openly before the council. Your Majesty, he said, addressing the queen, these children are half human. Can they truly stand against the threats that loom across the galaxy? Queen Illyria's voice was calm, but carried the authority of generations. Strength is not measured by species or bloodline alone, she said. It is measured by courage, by the will to protect, and by the ability to stand tall when others would falter. These children embody that strength. They have survived dangers I cannot imagine, and they have returned to us ready to help shape the future. Leora knelt beside them, brushing their hair softly and holding their small hands. We do not ask for blind acceptance, she said gently. We ask for observation. Watch them, test them, and you will see that they carry not weakness, but strength that comes from love, resilience, and the courage to face what others fear. The children, emboldened by their mother's words, stepped forward. The girl spoke first, her small voice confident but polite. We want to help. We want to protect our home like our grandmother taught us. We will learn and fight if needed, and we will honor everyone in this empire. The boy followed, his tone calm but unwavering. We are not only human or Zaralian. We are both. And that makes us stronger together, not apart. The council fell silent. Even the most cynical members could not deny the truth in their words. In their small, simple voices lay wisdom beyond their years. Their courage, their determination, and their respect for tradition and duty radiated through the hall. Queen Illyria felt her chest swell with pride. Leora had survived exile, danger, and uncertainty, and she had returned with not only her own strength, but the promise of a new generation. The children's bravery had proven that strength came in many forms, not just through power or lineage. And slowly, the court began to see that the future of the empire was not just in tradition, but in courage, unity, and the ability to embrace the unexpected. That night, as the twin suns set and painted the palace in hues of gold and silver, the queen and her daughter stood together, watching the children play quietly in the gardens. Hope was no longer a fragile spark, it was a flame, burning brightly for all to see. The throne room was quiet again, but this time the silence was different. It was not filled with doubt or whispers of fear. It was full of anticipation, awe, and a sense of wonder. Queen Illyria sat tall on her throne, her silver eyes glinting as she watched her daughter and the two children. The events of the past weeks had changed everything: the palace, the court, and even the hearts of those who had once doubted. Princess Leora knelt beside her children, holding their small hands gently. The children looked calm but determined, their eyes shining with courage that far exceeded their years. They had endured tests of skill, intelligence, and character, proving that they were not only part of the Zaralian family but also bearers of hope and strength that could cross worlds. The queen spoke first, her voice soft, but carrying the authority of her centuries of leadership. "My daughter, my grandchildren," she said, "you have returned not just to me, but to this empire. You remind us that courage and love are stronger than fear and doubt. You have shown that strength does not belong to one species alone. It belongs to those who dare to be brave, who dare to hope, and who dare to unite." Leora's gaze met her mother's, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief, pride, and deep love. "Mother," she said softly, "the humans I met, the worlds I traveled, they taught me that even when everything seems lost, courage can shine like a star. And my children," she gestured to the little boy and girl, "carry that courage within them. They are small, yes, but they are mighty in heart." The children stepped forward, each holding their mother's hand and now reaching toward the queen. "We promise to protect our home," the girl said, her voice steady. "We will learn, fight, and honor the people of this empire. We are ready." The boy nodded, his tone calm but unwavering. "We are a part of both worlds. That makes us stronger together. We will stand for those who cannot, and we will help our empire grow beyond fear." The court, which had once been filled with doubt, now listened in stunned silence. Even the oldest counselors, who had muttered about tradition and lineage, could not ignore the truth in these words. There was a courage here that demanded respect, a courage born not from power, but from love, resilience, and the will to protect others. Queen Illyria rose from her throne, her robes gliding across the marble floor. She approached her daughter and the children, reaching out to hold them all close. The two children looked up at her, their eyes wide, and she felt a wave of pride and hope that nearly brought tears to her eyes. In that embrace was not just a reunion, but a promise of the future bright, bold, and unshakable. "Today," the queen said, her voice strong and resonant, "we celebrate more than a return. We celebrate hope, courage, and the strength of unity. These children, and their mother, have reminded us that the heart is the greatest power any ruler can possess. From this day forward, the Zaralian Empire will not fear change. For we know that hope, love, and courage can overcome anything." The palace erupted in quiet applause, a ripple of approval that spread from the throne room to every corridor. Guards straightened, ministers bowed their heads, and even the most skeptical counselors found themselves smiling. The twin suns outside cast a golden light over the scene, illuminating the faces of the queen, her daughter, and her grandchildren. Leora knelt once more, brushing the children's hair and holding them close. "Mother, we are ready to face the future together," she said. Queen Illyria nodded, her heart full. "Yes," she whispered. "Together we will face whatever comes, and together we will thrive." As the sun set, the palace no longer felt like a place of silence or sorrow. It was alive with laughter, life, and the unshakable promise of a brighter tomorrow. The missing princess had returned. The children had proven their strength. And the